Well, in some parts of the American countryside, vast federal land ownership spurs tourism and also supports ranching. But its tax-exempt status makes it difficult for local governments to keep the lights on. RFD-TV's Sarah Mock has more from the nation's capital.
Reduced funding and the expiration of a key federal program has some rural communities in dire straits.
We have 14 counties now that no longer can afford 24-hour police coverage. To disgrace, some of these counties have as much as 90% federally owned, and they are just reneging on their responsibilities at the cost of life.
Funding for the Secure Rural Schools program expired in 2015, with final payments going out a year later. At the same time, funding for another program known as the Payment in Lieu of Taxes program, or pilt, dropped off, leading some to argue that the federal government isn't living up to its commitments.
A landowner pays their taxes so that we can fund our priorities, the schools, roads, and public safety. The federal government has to keep its obligation as a landowner to the local communities.
You know, you've seen these funds over the years really start to dwindle, and these payments aren't earmarks, they're not handouts, they're simply the federal government paying its fair share to communities that can't generate their own tax revenue because their home, if you look at my district, I represent more trees than people. And our communities are made up of a lot of federal lands, and that has an economic impact.
There was no additional funding for these programs in the bipartisan spending bill that passed in February, but rural legislators hope to see support for the programs in a spending bill that has to pass by March 23rd to avoid another government shutdown.
It would be particularly offensive to hold back these funds because if you do, you all know better than I, that's a policy to turn rural America into a sacrifice zone. And we're here to tell you that's not going to happen on our watch.
The sustainability of rural life, Kilmer says, is at the heart of these programs.
This is about giving rural communities certainty so that the next generation has the same opportunity to make a living in the same place that they grew up. Because I don't want our region's top export to be young people. We want to make sure that they can seek opportunities where they are, not someplace else.
County commissioners and lawmakers from across the country joined federal legislators on Capitol Hill to advocate for these programs. They hope to see movement in the coming days. For RFD-TV, I'm Sarah Mock in Washington.
Over the life of the original Save Rural Schools program, rural communities received about $7 billion, while the Payments in Lieu of Taxes program paid out around $5.5 billion.